Knowledge requires tools as an intermediary between your belief and knowledge that you can use to subsist as you go about the world, and also so you can socialize with other people, given that we're the most sociable creatures that the earth has hitherto seen. And so what I want to invoke from this is a great theorem called the Bayes Theorem that basically suggests that any posterior probability is equal to any prior data or prior information and its likelihood divided by the evidence, given that any evidence doesn't render something 100% true, right? And so this is something that the Canadian cognitive psychologist Steven Pinker really talks about and reverberates in his book, in his latest book, Rationality. And what's great about Steven Pinker is that he really cares about statistics and probability theory. And you'll see, I think he's one of the masters of proximate causes when he thinks about social sciences and the workings of it. But what I want to do is talk about the Bayes theorem and how we can use it outside of things like diagnostics, which does invoke things like Occam's razor and thinking of the simplest assumption about something given the nature of the immune system, etc. But I want to use the Bayes theorem to talk about how we can address this as epistemological knowledge when we think about some of the biggest questions that we have. So, for example, we've all probably heard of the Big Bang Theory, and what a lot of presuppositionalists or apologists of Christianity or any other Abrahamic religion or anything, what they usually do is talk about how it's a theory, which is great. So the four tools of knowledge that I talk about are skepticism, probability, logic, and evidence. And what's great about the Bayes theorem is that it inheres and implicates all four of them, given that we can rest on Bayes theorem and we can choose to use it at a great time, and we can also choose to step away from it when we need to think about things that are a bit more difficult, or when we're really not getting a real grasp or a real gauge of a problem that continues to recur, right, or incessantly recur. And so when we think about big questions in terms of knowledge, so for example, the probability of things being around me and being in its nature and acting in its nature the way it is very high. And we don't need to appeal to any conversation about metaphysics to talk about things being around us or working in the way it does, especially if it can be measured and tested very quickly. But when we think about things that happened a long time ago, so things that might precede 13.8 billion years ago, or even precede the Hadean eon or the Cambrian explosion 541 million years ago, and things that will happen in the future in a long time. And yes, I'm talking about superstring theories and metaverses, things like that, really cool theories, because we're talking about a realm of probability that gets lower and lower. Those theories can be very interesting. But this is the realm that sci-fi plays with, and this is why it's very cool when we think about knowledge, because insofar as they might be rendered fiction or considered fiction by many, they still play with higher probabilities that we'd get of things like wizards and unicorns and dragons and hippogriffs. And so this is what's very cool, to listen to physicists or cosmologists or astronomers and to listen to some of their theories, because the probability of those guys getting it right is higher than probably any apologist of Abrahamic religions or theologian or whatever. So this is what we talk about when we think about knowledge, right? Given that absolute certainty does not exist.